The story begins in a mysterious world floating thousands of kilometers above the sky. Reaching this place was almost the same as inviting death. Even so, a group of soldiers risked their lives and made it there. But the very next moment, they came face to face with the biggest and most dangerous giant in that world. Jack sensed that something was coming, so he quickly lowered his head into the water and hid. A few seconds later, he saw the giant's enormous footstep right in front of him. The sheep nearby got scared and ran away. Then the giant grabbed one of the sheep and swallowed it whole. Jack was horrified after seeing such a terrifying sight. At the same time, one of the soldiers hiding behind a tree slowly turned around to look at the giant, but the giant sniffed the air and immediately caught his scent. The frightened soldier quickly hid behind the tree again. However, the giant started walking straight toward him with huge steps. The soldier could not stay still anymore and suddenly ran for his life. But it was already too late. The giant had already spotted him. Without wasting a second, the giant ripped the entire tree out of the ground and threw it away. The soldier kept running, but his short legs could never match the giant's massive strides. The giant caught up within seconds and knocked him unconscious with a single hit. It was the first time the giant had ever seen a human. He bent down and looked at him with great curiosity. Just as he was about to pick him up, the captain rushed in with his sword and stabbed the giant hard in the heel. The giant roared in pain and turned around, but in the very next moment, he simply kicked the captain away with one light push. Then he pulled the sword out of his heel, picked up both soldiers, and carried them away to eat them. Jack watched everything from a safe distance. At that moment, he realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life by coming to this place. Sometime earlier, Jack had received a few magical beans from a priest. One day, his girlfriend, who was also the princess, came to visit him. As soon as one of those magical beans touched water, it started growing at an unbelievable speed. Suddenly, the small wooden house began shaking violently. Strange and frightening sounds came from beneath the ground. Both of them were frozen with fear and could not move. Then the ground suddenly cracked open and a gigantic beanstalk burst through the house and shot high into the sky. The princess immediately tried to run away, but a heavy table suddenly fell on top of her. Jack rushed forward to save her, but the giant vines threw him out of the house before he could reach her. At that moment, a wooden door suddenly opened, and the princess saw a way to escape. But just as she tried to run outside, the vines slammed the door shut. She desperately tried to open it, but it would not move at all. Seeing this, Jack quickly grabbed an axe and started cutting the vines. But before he could do anything, the entire house was ripped out of the ground and lifted into the sky. At the very last second, Jack jumped and managed to grab the edge of the house. The beanstalk kept growing so fast that within seconds the house had climbed thousands of meters into the air. Jack swung the axe with all his strength and finally cut through the vine. As soon as it snapped, the princess quickly opened the door. But in the next moment, the wooden floor beneath Jack's feet broke apart. Even though the princess tried to hold his hand, he lost his grip and fell from a height of nearly 10,000 meters. Jack slid down along the magical vines toward the ground. The vines slowed his fall a little, and eventually he crashed onto the ground and lost consciousness. But the princess was not that lucky. The giant beanstalk carried her far above the clouds into the mysterious world in the sky. The next morning, Jack woke up in panic and found the king standing in front of him, searching for the princess. Jack was completely shocked and had no choice but to tell him everything that had happened. When Jack pointed toward the sky, everyone saw the gigantic beanstalk stretching straight through the clouds. As soon as the king learned the truth, he wasted no time. He gathered a team of soldiers and sent them with Jack to rescue the princess. Soon, they all started climbing the enormous beanstalk together. Before long, they crossed the clouds and finally reached the mysterious world high above the sky. The captain stepped forward and began sliding across the giant vine because it was the only way to reach the princess. Seeing this, Jack had no other choice. He took off his belt, wrapped it around the vine, and got himself ready. But just as he gathered the courage to move, the curly-haired man standing behind him suddenly kicked him hard and pushed him forward. The moment Jack looked down from that unbelievable height, he completely froze with fear. While sliding across the vine, his hand suddenly slipped, and he lost his grip. He fell straight toward the ground, but by pure luck, the thick vines caught him halfway down. After regaining his senses, Jack did not waste a single second. He grabbed the vines again and started climbing back up with all the strength he had left, knowing that giving up now would mean losing the princess forever. As they climbed higher, the weather changed completely. Bright lightning flashed again and again. Then a powerful bolt of lightning struck one of the soldiers. The impact made him lose his grip. He slipped off the vine, crashed into the soldiers below him, and suddenly several men started falling together. For a few terrifying seconds, it looked like the entire rescue team would fall from the sky. At the very last moment, one soldier grabbed the rope tightly with both hands. Because of him, the others somehow managed to stay alive. But the soldiers who had fallen were now hanging far below. If they were not pulled back up immediately, everyone would be dragged down with them. Just then, Roderick looked at the man standing beside him and calmly said, "Cut the rope." The man liked the idea without asking a single question. He quickly pulled out a hidden knife from inside his boot. The soldiers hanging below begged for mercy and desperately pleaded with them not to do it. Their voices echoed through the sky, but Roderick showed no sympathy at all. The rope was cut without hesitation. In the next second, the helpless soldiers fell nearly 10,000 feet into the endless darkness below. Somehow, the remaining group finally reached the top. By then, the sun had also started rising. As soon as Jack turned around, he stood there completely speechless. Above the clouds was an enormous hidden world that looked nothing like the land below. The view was so breathtaking that everyone forgot where they were for a moment before carefully moving forward to explore the strange place around them. The captain soon noticed fresh footprints on the ground. From those marks, he realized the princess had not climbed back down. When the group walked out of a nearby cave, they were left stunned. The world before them was much larger than they had ever imagined. They carefully searched every corner while following every possible clue. After walking deeper into the forest, they noticed broken branches high above the ground. Those branches carried signs that the princess had passed through there. Around the same time, Jack found the same small book he had once given to the princess. Seeing it on the ground filled him with both hope and worry. Then they discovered several freshly broken branches nearby. From those marks, they realized a dangerous creature had most likely carried the princess away instead of her leaving on her own. Without wasting more time, the group split into two teams and headed in different directions to continue the search. As Jack and his companions walked farther, they reached a river where they spotted a herd of large and healthy sheep. Since they had not eaten properly for days, they decided to catch one and cook it. But the moment they tried to grab a sheep, they accidentally triggered a hidden trap. A giant net shot into the air and trapped them instantly. Jack quickly pulled out his knife and began cutting through the ropes with all his strength. At the same time, the captain also tried to free himself by cutting the net. Suddenly, he noticed something strange. Every crow nearby suddenly flew away in panic. At the same moment, the entire flock of sheep ran in the opposite direction as if they were escaping from something terrifying. The captain immediately felt that something was terribly wrong. Even so, he kept cutting the ropes until both of them finally escaped from the trap. Just then, a deep and frightening roar echoed through the forest. Before either of them could react, a gigantic giant appeared from the trees. It grabbed both soldiers with ease and carried them away. Jack quietly followed the giant from a safe distance. He knew this could be his only chance to rescue both his friends and the princess together. On the other side, Roderick and the remaining two soldiers reached the edge of a huge cliff. The bald soldier believed searching like this was a complete waste of time. He decided to leave and look for another path instead. But Roderick had already planned something else. He suddenly shouted, "Look, there is Isabelle!" The bald man quickly turned around and stepped back toward the cliff. The moment he came close enough, Roderick pushed him straight into the deep valley below. Watching him disappear, Roderick's companion burst into loud laughter, but his smile lasted only a second. A massive hand suddenly reached out and grabbed him. At that exact moment, another giant, as tall as a mountain, stepped out from behind the rocks and stood right in front of them. Roderick was so terrified that he fell to the ground. His hands shook as he hurriedly searched through his bag for something that could save his life. Just as the giant stretched out its hand to grab him, Roderick quickly pulled out a glowing crown. The moment the giant saw the shining crown, they instantly stopped moving. It was as if an invisible force had frozen them where they stood. The glowing crown was not an ordinary crown. It was a magical crown with incredible power. Whoever wore it could control the giants, and every giant was forced to obey every command without question. Meanwhile, Jack secretly followed the giant until he finally reached their hidden home. The place looked completely different from what he had imagined. Beautiful waterfalls flowed between giant rocks. Huge mountains surrounded the land from every side. The entire place looked so peaceful that it almost felt like heaven, even though it was filled with deadly giants. There, Jack spotted the princess locked inside a large cage. She was being guarded by a giant with two heads. A few moments later, that giant dragged her toward the rest of the giant tribe. Every giant gathered around and stared at her with great curiosity. Soon, the giant who had captured the captain and the heavy soldier also returned. He threw both of them beside the princess's cage like they were nothing more than food. The two-headed giant immediately became suspicious. He realized that if these humans were here, there might be more hiding somewhere nearby. To test his suspicion, he grabbed the heavy soldier lying on the ground. Without showing even a little mercy, he twisted the man's neck and swallowed him alive. After finishing, the giant casually spat out the soldier's metal armor because he could not eat it. The terrifying scene made everyone else completely helpless. Then the giant looked at the captain and threatened that the princess would be next. Just as fear spread across the area, A loud voice suddenly echoed through the giant camp. Every giant turned around at once. The person who had arrived was none other than the traitor, Roderick. The moment the giants saw the magical crown on his head, every one of them immediately dropped to their knees. At that moment, everyone finally understood what Roderick had been planning from the very beginning. He confidently walked straight toward the two-headed giant and ordered him to kneel as well. Even the powerful leader could not resist the magic of the crown. He slowly lowered himself to the ground. Roderick then stepped onto the giant's face and proudly walked across him before sitting on the giant king's throne. From that very moment, Roderick declared himself the new ruler of the giants. He proudly announced that together they would attack the human world and conquer every kingdom. Hearing those words, the giant army roared with excitement and celebrated their new king. But the two-headed giant stayed silent. Deep inside, it was clear that he was thinking about something very different. At the same time, another giant picked up the captain and prepared to cook him. He threw the captain onto a huge pile of thick, sticky dough. The more the captain struggled to escape, the deeper he became trapped inside it. Then the giant walked over and threw another handful of dough on top of him. After that, the giant folded the captain like part of a meal and placed him aside. Everything was almost ready. Only the vegetables were missing before the cooking could begin. As soon as the giant left to collect them, Jack quietly sneaked into the area. The princess was overjoyed to see him alive, but Jack quickly signaled for her to stay completely silent. While the giant remained busy, Jack slowly moved toward the cage. He tried to unlock it as carefully as possible, but the lock was too strong and he could not open it. The princess then whispered that saving the captain first was more important because he was about to be cooked. Jack immediately hurried toward him. He pulled out his knife and carefully started cutting the captain free from the sticky dough. Just then, the giant began walking back with spices in his hands. Seeing this, Jack quickly placed the knife into the captain's hand and hid before anyone noticed him. Luckily, the giant suspected nothing at all. He picked up several long, sharp wooden sticks and pushed one straight through a pig lying nearby. Now it was the captain's turn. The giant raised another sharp stick and struck without hesitation, but the attack missed by a tiny distance. If it had landed correctly, the captain was so terrified that he fainted on the spot. The giant then picked up the captain along with the other food and placed everything inside the giant oven that was already burning with fire. At that moment, Jack was their only hope. By then, he had quietly climbed onto a large iron ring hanging above the cooking area, and the giant still had no idea he was there. A few seconds later, the giant picked up a huge, sharp knife and walked directly toward the princess. Without wasting any time, he reached inside the cage, pulled her out, and placed her on the table. He was just about to cut her into pieces, but at that exact moment, Jack quietly grabbed another heavy knife lying nearby. The giant remained completely unaware. Just before the giant could attack the princess, Jack jumped forward and drove the knife deep into the giant's back. The giant screamed in unbearable pain. Jack held the knife tightly and refused to let go. The wounded giant lost control, stumbled backward, and crashed hard into the stone wall. The impact killed him instantly. The princess and the captain could hardly believe what they had just seen. Without wasting another second, the three of them ran toward the magical beanstalk so they could escape. But when they arrived, they discovered that a giant was already guarding the area. Roderick had placed him there to stop anyone from escaping. Jack looked around for a moment and suddenly an unusual idea came into his mind. Jack quickly put his strange plan into action. He picked up a large beehive, and together with the captain, he slowly walked toward the giant guarding the magical beanstalk. The giant was sleeping peacefully and had no idea that someone was standing right beside him. The captain carefully lifted the giant's helmet. At the same moment, Jack quietly placed the beehive inside it. As soon as the hive was in place, the captain quickly shut the helmet again. Then both of them ran as fast as they could and hid behind a nearby rock. Now all they could do was wait. The giant suddenly woke up screaming in pain. He shook his head and body wildly, trying to get rid of the bees. But the more he struggled, the more the bees attacked him. In complete panic, the giant started running without looking where he was going. He slipped on the rocks, crashed into the ground, and rolled toward the edge of a huge cliff. For a second, it looked like he was about to fall, but at the last moment, he pulled off his helmet. Jack, the captain, and the princess were shocked because they thought he had escaped. Then one stubborn bee flew straight toward him and stung him hard on the face. The giant completely lost his balance and fell off the cliff. The three of them could hardly believe what had just happened. They had defeated such a huge giant without fighting him directly. Feeling hopeful again, they immediately prepared to leave. But just then, the captain suddenly stopped. He said he had to stay behind because someone needed to take the magical crown away from Roderick. Jack understood the risk. He handed the captain his knife and started climbing down the beanstalk with the princess. At the same time, the giant's massive body finally crashed down to the ground below. The loud impact shook the entire area. Hearing the noise, the king rushed out of his tent. The moment he saw the giant lying there, he was completely terrified. Soon the villagers also gathered around, unable to believe their eyes. The king knew that more giants could come down at any moment. Even though it was a painful decision, he chose to protect his people first. He immediately ordered the general to destroy the giant beanstalk. The soldiers hammered huge iron spikes into the thick vine. Then they attached heavy hooks to the spikes. Using powerful horses and oxen, they began pulling the enormous beanstalk with all their strength. Slowly, the giant vine started moving from its roots. But as it shifted, the soldiers standing nearby were suddenly put in danger. The thick center vine began cracking apart. Several soldiers at the top lost their balance and started falling. Panic spread everywhere as everyone tried to escape before the entire beanstalk collapsed. Meanwhile, Jack and the princess were still climbing down the vine. When they looked below, they realized the beanstalk had become completely unstable. It could break apart at any second. Without wasting time, Jack grabbed the princess tightly. Then he jumped and caught a large hanging branch. Both of them swung through the air as they dropped lower and lower. Finally, they landed on a huge pile of hay. The soft landing slowed their fall, and both of them reached the ground safely. At the same time, Roderick gathered all the giants together. He was preparing to lead a full attack on the human kingdom. Just then, the two-headed giant sensed that a human was hiding nearby. The captain quickly stayed out of sight. As Roderick walked forward, he took out the magical beans that could grow another giant beanstalk. But before he could use them, the captain suddenly attacked him from behind. During the surprise attack, the magical beans slipped from Roderick's hand and landed on the rocks. Roderick himself lost his footing and fell into a deep pit. Trapped below, he shouted for the giants to rescue him. The captain stood above, ready to finish the fight. The two-headed giant immediately ordered the other giants to pull Roderick out. The giants began smashing the rocks to reach him. Down inside the pit, the final battle between the captain and Roderick had already begun. Using his long sword, Roderick knocked the captain to the ground. The captain's weapon flew far away. Roderick quickly took advantage of the moment and launched one attack after another. The captain immediately seized the opportunity and drove the sword straight into Roderick's stomach. The fatal blow ended the fight, and Roderick died where he stood. The moment Roderick died, the magical power of the crown disappeared. The captain quickly climbed back up and rushed to take the crown before anyone else could reach it. But before he got there, the cave above suddenly started collapsing. Huge rocks fell everywhere. Taking advantage of the chaos, the two-headed giant grabbed the crown first. He slipped it onto one of his fingers and proudly declared himself the new king of the giants. As soon as the crown touched him, its magical power returned once again. The other giants immediately bowed before their new ruler without saying a word. At that moment, the captain noticed something even more dangerous. The only beanstalk leading back to the human world was breaking apart and could collapse at any second. There was no time to think. He jumped onto the falling vine and rode it down as it rushed toward the castle below. At the perfect moment, he leaped away and landed safely in the water. When the two-headed giant realized that the path to the human world had been destroyed, he let out an angry roar that echoed across the valley. Then the smaller head noticed a bag lying on the ground nearby. It pointed toward it immediately. The giant picked it up and opened it. Inside were 4 magical beans. The giant became excited the moment he saw them. Without wasting any time, he blew the beans into the nearby water. The second the beans touched the water, they began growing at an unbelievable speed. 4 enormous beanstalks burst out of the ground, breaking through the earth and reaching straight into the sky. The giant gave a loud command, and the entire giant army rushed toward the new vines. One after another, they climbed down toward the human world. At the very end, the two-headed giant also jumped onto one of the vines and quickly slid down after his army. At that same moment, Jack was giving water to his horse. Suddenly, he looked up at the sky and froze. He saw dozens of giants sliding down the giant vines at incredible speed. He immediately jumped onto his horse and raced away to warn the king before it was too late. Meanwhile, the king and his army were calmly making their way back toward the castle. Jack spotted them from a distance and shouted as loudly as he could that the giants were coming. But at first, the king could not understand what Jack was trying to say. Before anyone could react, several giants suddenly burst out of the nearby forest. Everywhere they went, they destroyed everything in their path. Trees crashed to the ground. Buildings were smashed apart. Nobody could stop them. Within moments, the giant army reached the soldiers. One giant grabbed a soldier and swallowed him alive in front of everyone. Even the men on horseback could not escape because the giants moved much faster than anyone expected. At that moment, humans looked completely helpless against such massive enemies. Then one giant with a round face tore the giant blade off a nearby windmill. He threw it directly toward the princess. The huge blade crashed into the ground with tremendous force, destroying everything around it. The king's crown was knocked off his head during the impact. Back at the castle, the guards spotted the king's army returning in great panic. They immediately sent word inside that the enemy was approaching. The captain wasted no time. He ordered his soldiers to pour large amounts of oil into the deep moat surrounding the castle. This was their only chance to stop the giants before they reached the walls. As soon as the king's army arrived near the castle, the captain ordered the archers to fire. Hundreds of burning arrows filled the sky. The arrows landed in the oil below, and within seconds a massive wall of fire surrounded the castle. The king and his soldiers safely entered through the gates. The captain was relieved to see that the princess had returned alive. He immediately ordered the castle gates to be closed. But there was one problem. Jack was still outside, and several giants were chasing him. As the giant wooden gates slowly started closing, Jack pushed his horse to its limit. At the very last second, both Jack and his horse jumped through the narrow opening and safely entered the castle. Right behind them, the two-headed giant climbed onto the castle gate. Before he could get inside, the captain charged forward and attacked him. The giant lost his balance and fell directly into the burning flames below. Fire quickly spread across his body. Surprisingly, none of the other giants even tried to save him. They simply stood there and watched their own leader burn. Inside the castle, people had barely begun talking about what had happened when a huge iron bell suddenly came flying through the air. It smashed into the castle wall and destroyed a large section before crashing to the ground. Before anyone could recover from the shock, the sound of war echoed everywhere. At that moment, two giant iron hooks flew toward the castle gate. The giants locked the hooks onto the doors and started pulling with all their strength. The soldiers inside pulled from the other side, creating a fierce struggle to keep the gates standing. This entire attack had been planned by the round-faced giant. He called even more giants to help him tear the gates apart. Within moments, the castle was filled with panic and confusion. Realizing the danger, the princess quickly grabbed Jack's hand and hurried deeper inside the castle. Meanwhile, the old king ordered every soldier to use their crossbows to stop the giants before they could break into the castle. But the battle only became more dangerous. More giants arrived from the beanstalks and joined the attack. The castle army split into different groups. Even the king stepped forward to help. While asking the captain if the giants had any weakness, something unexpected happened. A burning tree suddenly fell from the sky and crashed into the battlefield. Before they could recover, more burning trees started falling one after another. The attacks forced the soldiers to loosen their grip on the ropes. With every passing second, it looked like the castle gate was getting closer to breaking. At the same time, the princess hurried deeper inside the castle with Jack. Suddenly, they heard a deafening roar. The ground began shaking violently and large cracks spread across the floor. Stones started rising into the air as if something enormous was pushing its way out from below. Then two gigantic hands burst through the ground. It was the same two-headed giant. Even after falling into the fire, he had somehow survived because he had fallen into the water beneath the flames. From there, he secretly entered the castle through the underground sewer tunnels. A moment later, the giant caught the royal scent of the princess. Jack quickly pulled a blanket over both of them and carefully looked outside. For a moment, it seemed the giant had not noticed them. But in his anger, the giant smashed a large mirror nearby. Jack and the princess trembled under the blanket, hoping to stay hidden. Their plan failed within seconds, because the giant spotted them from above. Jack grabbed the princess's hand and ran as fast as he could. The giant immediately chased after them. With no safe way out, the two rushed toward the upper floor of the castle. They did not even dare stop for a second. Suddenly, one of the giant's huge hands reached through the side and grabbed the princess. Jack quickly picked up an axe lying nearby and attacked without thinking twice. Before he could free her, the giant caught Jack with his other hand. The smaller head laughed and mocked him as if the fight was already over. Jack refused to give up. He swung the axe with all his strength and smashed the giant's helmet. Furious, the giant opened his enormous mouth. He quickly pulled it out and threw it straight into the giant's mouth. The magical bean went deep into the giant's stomach. Almost immediately, the giant felt something strange happening inside his body. He threw both Jack and the princess onto the floor. A second later, a thick vine suddenly burst out from inside him. Jack and the princess quickly moved back in fear. Then more and more giant vines exploded through the giant's body from every direction. The entire hall shook as the powerful vines ripped through him and smashed everything around them. The castle hall was left completely destroyed. During the chaos, the giant's hand, still wearing the king's magical crown, landed near Jack. Outside the castle, the soldiers were still desperately fighting to hold back the giant army. But after one loud command from the round-faced giant, all the giants moved together in perfect order. They slowly pushed forward and knocked the soldiers down one after another. The castle gate finally started opening. The captain immediately shouted for the soldiers to close the heavy iron gate behind it. Just then, the round-faced giant stepped out of the thick smoke with the rest of the giant army. The iron gate managed to slow him down for only a moment. With one massive strike, he smashed it apart. The giants stormed inside the castle. Looking at the frightened soldiers standing before them, they became excited because they now had fresh humans right in front of them. They were just about to attack when a loud voice suddenly echoed through the castle. Then, to everyone's surprise, he dropped his weapon onto the ground. The other giants immediately did the same. One by one, they knelt before the humans without saying a single word. Watching this unbelievable scene, even the captain stood frozen in complete shock. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video.